Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I wanted to talk just a little bit about scobies. And what is that? A lot of people still don't even know what a SCOBY is. And that's okay because a lot of people are new to vinegar making and kombucha making, and these are new words, and what on earth do they even mean? Well, SCOBY is actually an acronym which stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. And then SCOBY is the word that you call it. And I have one right here in this jar. It's just a small one. Normally your scobies will float on the top of your vinegar or on your kombucha, but with the vinegar, what I have found is once it is formed, if you don't have any fruit or herbs left in there to hold it up, when you go to move it, it will, the jar, it'll float down to the bottom. In fact, you'll see right here, this one that's sinking down to the bottom. This was actually another one that was starting to form at the top that I didn't even see until just now when I held this up to the camera. So that's what they tend to do, but there's nothing wrong with that. They are perfectly healthy. So again, symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast is what that is, and it is a very healthy thing that you should see forming on a lot of your vinegars. Now I said you should see, but that's not entirely true. Not every vinegar is going to get a SCOBY, but that doesn't mean it is not a good vinegar. In fact, some of the best vinegars I get are the ones that don't always get a SCOBY, like my herbal vinegars. For example, the floral vinegars I make to wash my hair with, those ones never form a SCOBY, or even if they do, usually it's not until after they are done and I've strained them and put them back in storage, and even then it's just a fine, very paper thin one like the one you saw in this jar of this is apple. This one I believe is from last year, the apple vinegar I made, and this was made from the apples I had turned into cider and then took the pulp from that and used it to make vinegar. So you can see in this picture here, that's why you'll see in those jars the pieces of apple are really small, because those are the ones that were I'd cut up and then pressed in my cider press. And then this one had a really big SCOBY in it, biggest one ever. And so I'm going to put a picture right here of how it looked in the jar. And then when I went to strain it out again, because this was actually a peach vinegar that's also from last year, and it's been sitting back there for a while, and I figured I'd get that SCOBY out because I'm going to try something with some of it. And here is how it looked on my cutting board. That thing is so huge. I've never had one that big. Now my peach vinegars, out of any of the vinegars I've ever made, always give me the biggest SCOBYs. So I'm going to put a few more pictures here, and if you watched my last vinegar making video, you saw some of these photos. Biggest one I had prior to that one is one you can see me holding, and I'm just getting ready to throw it to the chickens. So yes, when you're making vinegar, if you see that forming, it's on the top. It'll be a gelatinous layer. It's totally normal and natural and should be expected, but also don't concern yourself if you don't see it. A lot of times you might not actually get the SCOBY until after you have strained out your fruit, your herbs and whatnot, and then put the vinegar back into storage. A lot of times that's when mine form most of theirs. Some of them will form in the process of brewing the vinegar, but most not until after it's all done. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to shoot this video wasn't just to explain what a SCOBY is to those who are new, but to ask people out there what they do with their SCOBYs, because I get people that ask me questions all the time. What do you do with your SCOBYs? Do you save them? Now when you're talking kombucha, a lot of people will start what they call a little kombucha SCOBY hotel, and then they use those to start a new batch of kombucha, because with kombucha you really got to have your SCOBY when you're making your new batch. With vinegar it's not necessary. I've never found it necessary. Now I tried it one time just out of curiosity, taking a SCOBY from another vinegar to see if I would get a different result, and really it turned out just as good as ones I make without it. So I don't add a mother, I don't add any of the sediments into the to a new batch of vinegar. It's just the sugar, water, and fruit or herb, whatever it is I'm using. And again, I just published a video that you'll see about how I got started the apple vinegar back here. You can see how it's coming along. It's very fizzy. You can see the apples are starting to take on a softer appearance. You know, they're getting mushier, and that's totally normal. So very fizzy on top, and I can tell this is, I've been stirring it down daily, and it's I can tell it's going to turn out really good. And by the way, I do have fruit flies now. Weird that now I'm getting fruit flies, so I haven't had issues with them all summer. They're not real bad yet, but I do also have a video I did a couple years ago. If you're having issues with fruit flies, just one of the many ways that you can take care of them. It's just like with anything, there's many different ways that you can at least minimize your fruit fly population, and what I show in that video is just one of the many ways. It's the way I like to use. I've tried a few different things, and that one is my favorite. So don't forget to click on either show more or that little gray arrow over here if you're on a smart device to open up the description box and see the video links I'll be putting down below. So anyway, I did read at least one person who said they like to dehydrate their scobies and then powder them up and use them as a seasoning, and I thought that sounded interesting. Now it doesn't sound like something I really want to use on a lot, because I would think, doesn't it just taste like vinegar? Why not just use my homemade vinegar? But I thought, well, why not try it? Because it could have its own unique taste that the vinegar itself won't have, and it might add a different flavor to some of the dishes. So I did take some of that I showed you in that picture, which I'll put again right here. I cut a third of it off. I fed the other 2/3 to my chickens, because that's what I always do with my scobies, is I give them to the chickens because they're so healthy for them, and the chickens love them, and that way it kind of helps make up for the fact that I don't always remember to put vinegar in their water, which is really good for them, and you should do that, but I don't always remember to keep up on it. So I just feed them the scobies, and there we go. But anyway, I just thought it would be fun to give it a try and see what I think. And I will be shooting a video down the road. Most likely you'll see it in one of my this and that videos, on giving you an update on what I think. So I've got the SCOBY pieces, I just cut them up and then I put them on the dehydrator rack out there. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have some unique ideas of what they do with their different scobies. It doesn't matter if it's a kombucha SCOBY or a vinegar SCOBY. Go ahead and share with us down below. Now another question I get is, can you use the vinegar SCOBY to make kombucha? Well, technically speaking, I would think you should, because all kombucha is, if you actually let it finish its whole process like we used to do 30 years ago, back when I used to make kombucha, before we even knew it was called kombucha and we called it mushroom tea, we let it go all the way, the whole process, and we drank it as a vinegar to get the full benefits out of it. And some people stop the process early so they have more of a sweetened carbonated beverage, and it does taste a lot better, I'll tell you that. But kombucha is not really my thing. I didn't care for it a lot back then when I was making it either. I've only experimented once in taking a vinegar SCOBY and trying to convert it into a kombucha SCOBY, and that failed. But I know it's possible because I've read online where people have done it. And one of the ways is that you take your vinegar SCOBY, you start your batch of kombucha like you would your black tea and your sugar, and you put your vinegar SCOBY in there, and you let it sit until it, like you normally would with kombucha, until it forms a new SCOBY, and then that SCOBY, then the new one, becomes your kombucha SCOBY. Now my process, I tried, it started to work. I was starting to get a new SCOBY to form, and then it just quit. And the only reason I can think why it quit and it didn't finish out the process was because I had it sitting next to a bunch of other vinegars I had going. And I'm guessing that there's certain things, like maybe kombucha in particular, that SCOBY and just the kombucha itself might be a lot more delicate, and you have to be careful to not get your different things too close to each other, because they can contaminate each other and then cause issues with a good ferment. Now, that could be why too some of my vinegars don't turn out. Most of my vinegars are never an issue, but I do have a few that go bad in storage, and maybe that's why, though I highly doubt it, but I can see that possibly being the problem with kombucha. Because what you're going to have, just like with the peach, for example, the peach vinegar is the only one I've ever seen make SCOBYs that big. Now, I oftentimes will get nice healthy SCOBYs from my apple, but never like the ones I get with the peach. And then my floral vinegars, just and other herb-related vinegars, even the banana mint one, those never get SCOBYs on them, yet they're good, healthy, strong vinegars. And so my guess would be, without really looking into it, this is just a hypothesis, is that each thing that you use, whether it be black tea, because basically, again, kombucha is just a black tea vinegar, you know, if you let it finish out its process, or the peaches or the apples or the herbs, they're all going to have a different type of yeast and or bacteria on them that are going to make that SCOBY. And it could be that the ones that come from black tea in itself might be just more delicate and more susceptible to being contaminated by other yeast and bacteria that will prevent a good growth of a SCOBY like it should do. Or even prevent it from finishing out the process and turn into vinegar, because I should have at least had that black tea finish its process and turn to vinegar, but that never even happened either. So no good SCOBY other than that paper thin one that started out and then just quit. So I recommend looking it up for yourself and trying it, but what I really would like to happen is those who have tried the process and taken a vinegar SCOBY and converted it into a kombucha SCOBY, share with us down below how you did it, and even if you tried it and it didn't work for you, share with us your process and the problems that you have, because I think for those who are really wanting to do this and they don't know where to get a kombucha SCOBY, or they just want to try it and try a new way of making kombucha, I think there's got to be people out there that have the experience that can share that. For me, I don't. I've only tried it that one time. I have the experience back from years ago making kombucha. I've made kombucha again since with specifically a kombucha SCOBY and decided nope, not for me, and got back out of it again. And I think in both cases I got my SCOBYs, or the mushroom like we used to call it, from friends or family that were making it. And so usually you should be able to find, especially with so many people making it, you should be able to find somebody that has one. But there are other ways that you can come up with a kombucha SCOBY, and that is some people just go buy kombucha from the store, and especially if you can find one that has a little bit of the mother in it at all, you should be able to just do the process and let it form its own SCOBY. And again, please share with us down below if you use that method and how well that worked for you. Now, when it comes to taking your vinegar SCOBYs to make another batch of vinegar, which I believe I already mentioned, but you can do that if you want. I personally found it totally unnecessary. However, it wouldn't be a bad idea. One good thing about the SCOBY is when you lay it on top of your herbs and your fruit, it's going to stay on top there, and it's also going to naturally weigh down the fruit and the herbs so that they don't get exposed to air, and that might make it so you don't have to stir your vinegar every day like I prefer to do when I remember. It can actually go 2 to 3 days and it's not a problem, but there's that point where it's real bubbly and it wants to push the fruit and herbs up out of the liquid. Well, if you leave it there, those will mold. It's not going to hurt you if that happens, but some people are a lot more squeamish about it, and it is nice if we can totally avoid that mold altogether. So by stirring and pushing down is one way, but I really think you're using a SCOBY from another batch of vinegar and putting it on top for those who are afraid of remembering to stir or just don't want to mess with it. That could be one way that will work for you. Yes, like I talked about in that other video, you can buy weights and all that kind of stuff. I think anything that kind of prevents a lot of oxygen from getting down into the vinegar is not the best way. I still think stirring is the best because you're keeping it aerated, and that's what it needs to be to get a good healthy vinegar, but it still can be done without stirring if you prefer. Okay, well, again, this was mostly about interaction. Let's get some community talk here, and let's all learn from each other when it comes to that. And also just to inform people that are totally new, what on earth is a SCOBY? Now you know. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new from it. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.